Or were you watching from when the scream shattered the Texas heat like a bullet through silence? From a phone screen in a city apartment? From a truck stop cafe with the sound barely audible over fried bacon and AM radio? Or were you right there with me, bare hands full of dust and hay, heart already sprinting before the legs caught up, running toward the one place no soul should ever go alone? The barn. The old one. The one with the basement. I heard it before I saw anything. A scream, high, sharp, not like fear but like terror pressed into steel. I dropped the pitchfork, didn't bother with gloves or boots, and tore across the pasture like a man chased by fire. The sun was cruel that day, sky so white it ached behind the eyes. But none of that mattered. I knew what that scream meant. Someone had gone into the barn. And not just the barn, the basement. You don't just walk into that place. There's a reason I built 3 locks on the door and buried the latch to the cellar beneath a false panel. Because underneath that old barn, past the rusted tools and the bales of dry grass, behind a creaky staircase and a reinforced door, lives Hank. And Hank isn't a rumor. He's not a tall tale or a warning sign. Hank is a grizzly. 700 pounds of muscle, fur, and memory. But he's not a threat. Not unless you break the only rule I've ever made. No one enters the barn unless I'm with them. I've followed every law since the day I rescued him. I've got the permits, the vet records, the state tags, and even a microchip the size of a rice grain under his thick hide. Hank isn't a pet. He's a permanent rescue. He was a cub when the flood washed him down from the wildlife preserve, injured and alone, with a cut over his eye and a noise like crying I still remember hearing in my dreams. I didn't save him because I wanted a story. I saved him because I couldn't let something that helpless die in the mud while the rest of the county turned away. But that's not what HOA Karen saw when she looked at him. I saw her before I got to the door. Blonde bob bouncing with each hysterical step, red lips parted in a scream, high heels sinking into dry dirt like she thought she was walking a runway. Her phone was in one hand, camera up, as if she thought she could document me into submission. It's an eyesore, she'd said a week earlier when I put up the no trespassing sign. I told her calmly, this was private land. Not Sunset Valley HOA property. Not hers. She laughed in that tight, artificial way that people laugh when they're used to being obeyed and don't know what to do with resistance. Oh, we'll see about that, she said. Now she was halfway down the cellar stairs. And Hank was awake. I could hear it, low and slow like the growl of distant thunder. A sound more felt than heard. Hank wasn't attacking. Not yet. He was watching. Judging. His breath huffed through the half-darkness, and in the flash of the dusty bulb above, I saw him rise. Not all the way, just enough. Tall enough that Karen dropped her phone, her breath, and what was left of her dignity in one motion. The device tumbled down the stairs and stopped, silent, useless, just inches from Hank's paws. She screamed again. What is that thing? Is that a real bear? That's when the cellar door slammed shut behind her. The old wind, maybe. Or karma. Or maybe just time itself locking her in the moment she chose to break everything that kept people safe. I hit the door a second later, yelling, "Don't move. Don't scream." But the panic had already found her veins. She turned and pounded on the wood, eyes wide with that suburban entitlement that thought the world would rearrange itself to accommodate her terror. But fear doesn't care about your HOA title. And neither does a grizzly. "Open this door," she shrieked, stomping her heel. The sound echoed down the stairs like a challenge. Bad idea. Hank took one step forward. Just one. Enough to make her freeze mid-breath. "You can't keep a bear down here. I'm calling the authorities." "You're lucky he hasn't eaten your phone," I muttered, fiddling with the rusted latch. Her mouth moved, but no words came out. Her hands trembled like paper caught in wind. When the door finally gave, I slipped inside, moving slow, one hand up. "Easy, buddy. She's not worth it." Hank exhaled, a deep, tired sound like he was already over it. He backed away, body low, powerful but calm. "Karen?" She ran like the world was on fire. She burst through the doorway and didn't stop until she reached her white Lexus, now splattered in mud and irony. She spun on me, fingers shaking. "This isn't over. I'm pressing charges." "For what?" I asked, still calm. "You trespassed. You broke into my barn. You're lucky you're not on a stretcher." She had no answer. Just the sound of a luxury engine spinning gravel in defeat. The silence afterward was thick. Hank returned to his tire, gnawed at it like nothing had happened. But I knew better. I knew Karen. And I knew people like her didn't stop when they were wrong. They only stopped when the world stopped them first. And the next morning, the world didn't stop her. It showed up to help her. Flashing lights outside my gate. A sheriff's cruiser. 2 animal control trucks. Behind them, Karen Monroe in a fresh suit and folded arms. She looked like victory carved from lipstick and spite. "You got 5 minutes to open the gate," the deputy said. "On what grounds?" I asked. Karen stepped forward. "You assaulted me with a bear." I blinked. "You climbed into a locked barn cellar and scared yourself." She didn't flinch. "You endangered my life." "You don't belong here," I said. This isn't HOA territory. This is mine. But it didn't matter. The cameras were already rolling. Phones pointed. Reports being written. And every part of my body buzzed with the truth I'd known since she first knocked on my fence with that clipboard and smile like a blade. This wasn't about a barn. This wasn't about a bear. This was war. And I was already surrounded. But here's the thing about people like me, people with dirt on their boots and memories stitched into fence wire. We don't scare easy. And Hank's not the kind of bear you corner. Because sometimes, when you push a man too far, the barn doesn't hold the beast. It releases it. And now, I want to ask you again, where are you watching from? Because this story is just beginning. The sky that morning held a strange stillness, like the air knew something I didn't. It was too quiet. No wind. No birds. Even the goats were subdued, pacing like they could feel the storm that hadn't come yet. But the damage had already begun, just not the kind you can see in the sky. I'd spent the night replaying every second of Karen's breakdown at the barn, hearing her screams echo against the wood, seeing the way her face twisted when she realized she'd lost control. And I knew, deep in the marrow of my bones, that she wasn't done. People like her never are. Entitlement doesn't retreat, it regroups. Still, I didn't expect to see the flashing red and blues parked at my front gate by sunrise. The deputy's cruiser came first. Then the two white vans, marked Texas Animal Control. And behind them, like a queen surveying her battlefield, Karen Monroe stepped out of a gleaming Lexus, so clean it looked dipped in glass. Her lipstick was sharper today, her hair sprayed like armor, and her arms were crossed tight like she was holding together the illusion of righteousness by sheer will. Mr. Jacobs, the sheriff barked through the gate. Open up. You've got 5 minutes. On what charge? I replied, voice even. Harboring a dangerous wild animal. Karen cut in before he could speak. An assault. That bear could have killed me. But it didn't, I said, stepping forward. Because I stopped it. Because I rescued you from a situation you caused. You failed to disclose there was a live bear under a barn, she snapped. You broke into it, I reminded her. Cut through my lock, crossed onto private land, entered a sealed cellar. The sheriff held up a hand, but the damage was done. Her accusation was out in the air, like smoke looking for dry wood. Sir, one of the animal control officers stepped up. Do you currently house a bear on this property? Yes, I answered. His name is Hank. He's registered. Licensed. Monitored under federal and state rescue guidelines. Wait here. I didn't run. I walked. Calm and slow, straight back into my house while Karen hissed behind me. He's fleeing. He's hiding evidence. The sheriff didn't move. Ma'am. Settle down. Inside, I retrieved the folder. Thick. Heavier than it looked. Years of documentation, every receipt, every tag, every veterinary report, every updated compliance check. I handed it to the officer like a man handing over his name. She flipped through. Her eyes slowed. Grizzly bear male Hank. Rescued 2017 flood. Certified under Emergency Wildlife Rehabilitation Code 47A. Microchipped. Vaccinated. She turned another page. Permits renewed. Quarterly checkups. Habitat inspection cleared. Karen stepped forward, fuming. But he's under a barn. In a reinforced substructure designed with wildlife specialists, I added. You're free to inspect it, just not with heels. The officer snapped the folder shut. It's all here. This is one of the most thorough rescue files I've seen. I smiled. Just slightly. Told you. But Karen didn't flinch. Her voice rose like a banshee trying to outscream a verdict. He locked me in with it. It's criminal. He's unstable. The sheriff turned to her. How'd you get in? She blinked. I was investigating. So you trespassed, he finished for her. And damaged property. She opened her mouth, closed it, then snapped. You people don't understand. We have community standards. Safety expectations. He's a threat to the neighborhood. Which neighborhood? I asked. You don't live here. You don't govern this land. I've got a gate. A sign. A fence. A file cabinet full of law backing me up. The woman with the clipboard, someone from the city permit office, judging by her stiff white blouse and soft-heeled shoes, finally spoke. Ma'am, this land is not within Sunset Valley HOA jurisdiction. It is its own parcel. Legally exempt. Karen turned red. But she wasn't finished. She never was. She stormed back to her Lexus without another word, slammed the door, and peeled away, her tires flinging mud like curses behind her. For a moment, I thought it might end there. The truth was clear. The evidence unshakable. The witnesses official. Hank lay in the shade beside the porch, panting softly, eyes half-lidded like he knew he'd won. But peace never holds long where power feels bruised. The next morning, I got a letter shoved through my broken mailbox. Cease and desist. From the HOA legal team. Alleging violation of community peace, wildlife hazard, and public nuisance. Signed, Karen Monroe, President. It was ridiculous. but also strategic. See, when you can't win legally, you make noise. You flood the system. You poke holes in calm until it leaks rage. I laughed. Out loud. I wasn't scared yet. But I was paying attention. I started checking the perimeter more often. Walked the barn every night. Changed the padlocks. But paranoia, it turns out, is just preparation in slow motion. And it wasn't long before I found the SUV tracks. Narrow. Fresh. Not mine. They looped around the back, right to the barn. I dropped the feed I was carrying. Ran. Fast. The barn latch was loose. And the basement door was open. My stomach flipped. I rushed down. The lights were off. The air smelled wrong, chemical and cold. Then I heard it, a low whimper muffled. I flicked the switch. What I saw turned my blood to rust. A steel cage. New. Shiny. In it, Hank. Sedated, eyes heavy, body limp. Next to it, a man in a Sunset Valley HOA polo shirt holding a tranquilizer pole. He looked up like a kid caught stealing from a church offering plate. Oh, sir, this is scheduled wildlife removal. Authorized by who? I roared. He stammered. But before he could finish, the barn doors slammed above us. Someone else was still here. Then came the smoke. The spark. The crack of dry wood catching fire. And just like that, we were trapped. Me. Hank. And the idiot with the pole. I dragged him by the collar. You're going to explain every damn detail of this setup. But he was already choking. Coughing. Panicking. I didn't have time to lecture. I had a bear to save. I remembered the old storm tunnel, built decades ago, long forgotten. Buried behind sacks of feed and forgotten tools. I shoved them aside. There it was. A hatch in the concrete. I kicked it twice. It groaned. The bolt slipped. Narrow, but wide enough if we tilted the cage. I turned to the guy, now wheezing. You want out? Help me move him. He nodded. Shaking. We pushed the cage through the tunnel, inch by inch, dragging Hank through smoke and ash and hell itself. By the time we reached daylight, the fields around the barn were already catching. I threw a tarp over Hank to block the sun. Then I saw her, standing by the treeline. Karen, in sunglasses, holding a remote in one hand. Watching, not hiding, not even pretending. She turned, walked back to her Lexus, and disappeared. By the time the volunteer fire crew arrived, it was too late. The barn was a skeleton, but the real fire had only just begun. I stood in the ashes, hand on Hank's still chest, now rising again in slow recovery. We're not backing down, I whispered. Not now. Not ever. Because if this was war, I knew how to fight. And someone was going to learn just how dangerous a peaceful man can become when you burn down the one place he calls home. I didn't sleep the night after the fire. Not even a blink. I sat in the garage next to Hank, who lay wrapped in wet towels, breathing slow and heavy like thunder rumbling across a quiet plain. His eyes fluttered open every so often, still dull from the sedative, but alive. That was all I cared about. He was alive. But my mind wasn't calm. It spun like the last unbroken fan in a burning house. The fire hadn't been an accident. The cage hadn't been a coincidence. That man in the HOA shirt hadn't just wandered in with a tranquilizer pole for fun. This was planned, funded, executed. By who? And why now? They didn't want Hank gone. They wanted him used, framed, blamed. They wanted me discredited, destroyed, erased. So I did the only thing I could. I gathered evidence. I started at sunrise, camera in hand, walking the barn ruins while the wood still steamed from the flames. I documented the blackened remains of the padlock. Snapped pictures of the footprints near the basement hatch. One set smaller, high-heeled impressions near the edge. Another larger set leading to the cage, smudged but fresh. I followed those prints to a new set of tire tracks barely visible through the smoke-dusted grass. Too small for a fire truck. Too precise for a service vehicle. Lexus tires. Karen. Of course. I backed up every file. Uploaded every image. I sent copies to 3 places. My lawyer, the county sheriff, and a local reporter I knew from high school who owed me a favor. Within 48 hours, Channel 5 aired the first segment. Bear in the basement, hero rancher or wild animal threat. The name was sensationalist, but the footage told the truth. And the truth had teeth. Karen released a statement through a PR firm, full of legal-safe words like deep regret and unfortunate misunderstanding. She denied involvement. Blamed the cage job on an unauthorized volunteer from the HOA committee. A lie. I knew it. And so did the sheriff. He called me personally. Noah, he said, his voice tight. We're launching an investigation. And that HOA guy you found in the basement? He's talking. I leaned forward in my chair. Talking how? He admitted Karen paid him. Cash. No documentation. Said it was a quick cleanup job. Tranquilize the bear, remove it from the property, claim it was a threat to the public. No animal control. No permits. That's conspiracy, I said. That's attempted theft. That's animal cruelty. Arson. Attempted entrapment. And it gets worse, he replied. Because this wasn't just her. There's more. The guy claims Karen's part of a group, unofficial but connected. HOA members from multiple neighborhoods. They've been talking about cleaning up the county. For development. Buying out older residents. Forcing annexations. I stood up. The room spun for a second. A land grab? More like a shadow HOA, he said. Unofficial but powerful. Karen's just loud. Someone else is pulling the strings. That was when it all clicked. The sudden aggression. The escalation. The letter claiming I violated ordinances, even though I wasn't under their jurisdiction. The anonymous reports. The fire. They weren't trying to punish me. They were trying to scare me off the land. I called my lawyer that night. She was clear. You need to move the bear. Now. They won't stop until they ruin you, or take him. Or both. So the next morning, before the sun had cleared the trees, I loaded Hank into the horse trailer, still weak but alert enough to grunt at the hinges. We drove 3 hours west to a rescue center owned by an old friend from my forest ranger days. He didn't ask questions, just welcomed us with quiet eyes and a firm handshake. Hank would be safe there, but I had a war to finish. When I returned to the ranch, I found my mailbox smashed again. This time, a new letter shoved inside. Notice of structural code violations. Cleanup required within 7 days. Signed again, HOA President Karen Monroe. She burned my barn and now fined me for the ashes. I didn't scream. I didn't punch the wall. I just smiled, walked inside, and booted up the computer. I compiled everything. Photos. Surveillance footage. Audio from a security cam that had caught Karen's voice near the barn a day before the fire. Then I dropped the hammer. I uploaded it all to the Channel 5 reporter. She went live that same night. Bear basement fire scandal. HOA accused of illegal raid and arson. It exploded. Local news turned national by morning. Online forums lit up. Wildlife groups posted their outrage. Animal rights organizations called for federal action. Even a state senator weighed in. Karen's smile disappeared. And then so did Karen. For a few days. No Lexus. No letters. No sightings. Just silence. I started to believe maybe it was over. Maybe the heat had scared them off. Then came the knock on the door. Deputy Ramirez. Young, serious, no nonsense. She looked tired. We arrested the guy from the barn, she said. But he says something worse. Karen didn't act alone. She's working with a man named Michael Lane. Developer. Her ex-husband. He's been buying up land across the county. Quietly. Through shell companies. And you're next on his list. How close? I asked. She handed me a zoning map. Very. He filed a motion at City Hall to annex your ranch into Sunset Valley HOA. I stared at the paper. If they succeed, they can legally control your land. Enforce rules. Force removal of wildlife. Even push to seize the property if deemed non-compliant. My heart dropped. When's the vote? 2 days. That night I didn't sleep. Again. I stayed up organizing everything. Documents. Video. Vet records. A printed map of the burn site. But I also prepared something else, Hank's story. The way I found him. The rehab process. His transformation. A folder full of truth. I rolled into town before sunrise on the day of the vote. Parked in front of City Hall. But before I could step out of my truck, a man in a hoodie appeared from the shadows and slashed my rear tire. I jumped out, but he was already gone. On the windshield, he'd taped a single paper. Back off, or next time it's you. No signature. Just a threat. And proof that this wasn't just HOA overreach anymore. This was organized intimidation. I changed the tire, dirt on my hands, breath sharp in my throat. Then I walked into the meeting. City Hall was packed. Sunset Valley residents on one side, ranchers and locals on the other. At the front, Karen. Back in white blouse, red lips, that same smug look like none of this touched her. The mayor called the room to order. Next item, Sunset Valley's motion to annex adjacent land parcels, including Jacob's Ranch. I stood, walked to the podium, held up the folder. My name is Noah Jacobs. I've lived on this land for over 15 years. This land has been in my family for 4 generations. It's not part of any HOA, and it never will be. The room hushed. I held up a photo of Hank. This is a registered, federally monitored rescue animal. Housed safely, legally, until this HOA tried to steal him, drug him, trap him. Then, when that failed, they burned my barn with him inside. Gasps echoed. Karen's face turned pale, then red. I pulled out the note from my windshield. This is how they respond when truth threatens them. With threats, violence, bribes. I stepped down. Karen stood up, finger pointed. You'll regret this. You think you're a hero. You're just a washed-up cowboy with a wild animal. But no one clapped. No one cheered. The sheriff stood from the back. Followed her outside. 20 minutes later, the council returned. We unanimously deny the annexation request, the mayor declared. And we are opening a formal investigation into HOA misconduct. Applause. Enough to shake the windows. I walked outside into the sunlight. But the war wasn't over. That night, Ramirez called again. Karen's out on bail. But her lawyer? Same guy who forged the deed to your land boundary. Name's Alan Doyle. Works under Michael Lane. You're saying they've already started taking it? Worse. According to county records, part of your land was quietly sold 3 months ago. A fake quitclaim deed. $10. To Sunset Valley Development Group. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. Because I knew one thing now. This wasn't about a bear. It was about everything. And I wasn't going to lose it without making sure the whole damn country watched them try. I didn't even make it halfway back to the ranch when I saw the machinery. 2 bulldozers. A surveyor truck. A handful of men in yellow vests marking trees with spray paint like they already owned the dirt they were standing on. I slammed on the brakes, kicked open my door, and stormed across the gravel toward the first man I could find. He looked up from his clipboard, unfazed. Can I help you? You're standing on my land, I growled. What the hell do you think you're doing? He barely blinked. We've got clearance. It's marked for access development. From who? I snapped. Sunset Valley Development Group, he replied, tapping the form on his clipboard. Deed shows a quitclaim filed in March. Says this strip's part of the annexation agreement. I yanked the paper out of his hand. Fake. Sloppy signature that looked more like a doodle. No official seal. Just enough formatting to confuse someone who wasn't paying attention. But I was. This is forgery, I said. I never signed this. And this land, this specific parcel, is under family trust protection since 1986. The man shrugged. Not my problem. Talk to your HOA. I'm not in the goddamn HOA. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a black SUV rolled up the dirt path like a snake gliding through grass. Out stepped a man I hadn't seen before. Tall. Expensive suit. Dark glasses despite the clouds overhead. He adjusted his cufflinks like this ranch was a courtroom, and he'd already won. Mr. Jacobs, he said with a voice like silk over barbed wire. I'm Richard Knox, legal counsel for Sunset Valley's development interests. He extended a hand I didn't shake. He smiled. We're here today for a preliminary site assessment. Nothing invasive. Just some light clearing to prepare for access infrastructure. All very routine. You forged my signature, I said, holding up the document. You illegally claimed land that doesn't belong to you. Prove it, he said softly. And when you do, I'm sure the court will be very interested. But until then, we've got a schedule to meet. My fists curled. You touch one tree on my side of that line, and I'll chain your bulldozer to the front of your Lexus and drive it into your office lobby. He gave me a long, unreadable stare. Then he turned to the crew and said, Stand down. For now. They packed up. Not in a hurry. Not scared. Just delayed. And that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a mistake. It was a message. That night I dug through every box in the attic. Every file cabinet. Every yellowed envelope with a paperclip barely holding its rust. Ellie arrived just past midnight. Her truck was dusty and beat up. A badge decal faded on the rear window like a ghost of past authority. She didn't say hello. Just walked in, looked at the map spread across the table, and said, How deep are they in? Too deep, I replied. They forged deeds, bought off lawyers, and now they're physically testing boundaries. She scanned the papers. We need proof. Solid, dated, notarized. Something older than them. At 2:17 a.m., I found it. A notarized copy of the boundary deed from 1986. Signed by my grandfather. Family trust clause highlighted. Legally irrevocable. Ellie smiled. They messed up. We filed an emergency injunction the next morning. But before we could even finish the paperwork, Ramirez called again. Karen's out, she said. And guess who posted her bail? Michael Lane, I said. Bingo. And there's more. We cross-checked the security contractors from the barn fire. All 3 are tied to a firm registered in Houston. Guess whose name is on the board of that holding company? Lane again? He's laundering power through HOA puppets and shell companies, she said. And we think he's planning something worse. Something fast. We got back to the ranch that afternoon to find the gate wide open. Not broken. Just open. Hanging on its hinges like someone had walked in and didn't care if they were seen. On the porch, a white envelope. Inside, photos. Of me. Of Ellie. Of Hank. All taken from the woods. Long lens. High angles. On the back, red marker in the same sharp handwriting. The bear is just the beginning. We both froze. Ellie scanned the trees, jaw tight. They were on the property. Recently, I added. One of those shots is from inside the garage. That night we didn't sleep. We locked every door. Every window. Ellie set up trail cams, motion sensors, infrared beams. She climbed trees and set up a sniper perch like she was back in Kandahar. "They're coming," she said. "And when they do, we'll be ready." The breach came at 1:44 a.m. A soft crackle in the walkie. Perimeter trip north fence. Ellie was already at the door, boots on, rifle in hand. I grabbed the shotgun and followed. 3 figures in black. 2 moving toward the barn. 1 circling the house. They moved like they'd done this before. Not HOA volunteers. Professionals. Ellie whispered through the mic. "Hold until they enter the red zone." The first man reached the barn doors. Bolt cutters in hand. I clicked off the safety. But Ellie was faster. She flipped the switch. Boom. Flashbang lit up the night like lightning ripping the sky in half. The intruders dropped to the ground, stunned. We rushed forward. Ellie tackled one. I aimed at the second. The third tried to run. Didn't make it past the tree line before Ramirez's cruiser lights hit him full in the face. By dawn they were cuffed. All 3 ex-security contractors. Paid in cash. Untraceable until now. But one of them cracked. "We were supposed to make it look like an escape," he said. "Tranquilize the bear. Leave the gate open. Blame the rancher. Then the state seizes the property under wildlife endangerment." "And the fire?" Ellie asked. "Wasn't the plan this time," he muttered. "Just bad luck last time, maybe." But we both knew better. By noon, Richard Knox was in custody. By 2 p.m., federal agents raided the development office in town. Computers seized. Files boxed. Michael Lane's name popped up in email chains. Financial transfers. Fake HOA memos. It all unraveled. Karen was arrested again for violating bail and new charges: conspiracy, trespassing, attempted animal theft. She screamed at the cameras, "This isn't over. I'll get it all back." I stood on the porch, shotgun across my chest, Ellie at my side, and Hank now safe again in a newly reinforced barn with steel locks, climate control, and a direct tunnel to the main house. 2 months later, the land was quiet again. Trees regrew. The barn stood stronger than before. Kids came to visit. Wildlife groups toured the rescue center. Ellie helped build a program for veterans. But just when we started to breathe, one last envelope appeared. Tucked beneath the porch. No return address. Inside, a photo of another ranch. Different land. Different sky. But same fencing. Same barn structure. And on the back, 4 words. "You're not the only one." Ellie read it. Then looked up. "Pack your bag," she said. "We're not done." I nodded. Because in this fight, there's always another line in the dirt. Another predator in a suit. Another piece of ground they think they can steal. But I've got roots deeper than their greed. And I'm just getting started. The morning we left the ranch, the fog hung low over the hills like a veil trying to keep a secret. Hank was asleep inside the barn, snoring slow and steady, completely unaware that once again his life, and mine, had stirred something bigger than us. Ellie had already packed the gear by the time I poured coffee into 2 metal mugs. I handed her one. She didn't smile. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. That envelope had said everything. You're not the only one. Somewhere out there, someone else had fought this same shadow. Same type of barn. Same kind of fencing. Same threat dressed in legal paperwork and fake authority. I wasn't sure where it would lead. But Ellie had a name. Lila Ashcroft. Former ranch owner. Northern Arizona. Her land had been seized 2 years ago under a wildlife endangerment clause. Same language they tried to use on me. No bear though. Wolves. A mated pair she'd been licensed to rehabilitate. They disappeared the night before the official seizure. Never found. No charges filed. No media attention. The case vanished like smoke. Except someone remembered. Someone sent that photo. And that meant someone wanted it seen. We drove through 3 states in silence, stopping only for gas and bad coffee. I kept looking in the rearview mirror like I expected to see Karen's Lexus rising from the dead. But this wasn't about her anymore. She was a pawn. And pawns get sacrificed early. The house in Arizona sat on a slope just outside of Prescott. The land was dry and tired, the kind of place that had once been loved and now just endured. The mailbox was gone. Burned out. Blackened like mine had been. Ellie slowed the truck and stepped out first, scanning the area like she expected a sniper behind every cactus. I followed, boots crunching gravel. The woman who answered the door wasn't what I expected. Thin. Gray-haired. Tough eyes. Dressed like someone who had once built fences by hand and could still swing a hammer if needed. "You must be Jacobs," she said. Her voice didn't ask. "And you're the one they couldn't buy." I nodded. "Not yet, anyway." She stepped aside. "Then come in before they follow you here." The inside of her home was dark but neat. Bookshelves lined the walls, old legal texts, wildlife manuals, 3 thick binders marked with dates and property lines. Lila poured us tea from a battered kettle and got to the point faster than a prosecutor. "They took my wolves," she said. "Falsified reports. Claimed one attacked a tourist. No names. No photo. No incident report ever surfaced. They showed up with trucks, badges, and orders. Gave me an hour to hand them over. When I refused, they said I'd violated the rehabilitation clause. Called it an emergency seizure. And the wolves? I asked. Gone, she said. Vanished that night. I filed reports. No response. Sent proof to the press. No one ran it. They said there was no verifiable threat to the public interest. The judge dismissed my countersuit in under 10 minutes. Ellie leaned forward. Who signed the order? A man named Douglas Vance. Real estate lawyer. Same guy who later oversaw the acquisition of my land by Horizon Ridge Developments. I felt my gut twist. Horizon Ridge. They're tied to Michael Lane. One of his shell companies. Lila nodded. I know. I've been tracking them. Quietly. Waiting for someone else to pop up. When I saw your story hit national, I knew it was time. She stood and pulled a worn box from under the couch. Inside photos. Maps. Emails. Deed transfers. Some of them forged. Some of them incomplete. But together they painted a picture. Not just of one stolen ranch. Dozens. All through a network of fake HOAs, fast-tracked zoning overrides, and animal-related legal pretexts. They use wildlife as the wedge, Lila said. It's smart. Emotional. Unpredictable. Public gets scared, government gets leverage, and you, the landowner, look like the crazy one if you resist. But why? I asked, even though I already knew. Ellie answered for her. Because land is power, and power attracts the worst people. We stayed in Arizona 3 more days. Cross-referencing documents, building a case. Lila had names, dates, even a partial list of judges who fast-tracked HOA annexations without due notice. One name repeated 3 times, Judge Ronald Weiss. Known for pro-development rulings linked to Horizon Ridge, quietly received campaign donations from Lane's companies through community improvement funds. We sent a file to Ramirez. She replied the next day. Feds are already sniffing around. But this puts the timeline in motion. And it puts pressure on them. Good work. When we got back to Texas, the ranch felt different. Like the dirt knew we were being watched again. Hank greeted us at the gate, big head bumping my side, breath warm and steady. I leaned against him for a second, just breathing. But peace didn't last. That night, another envelope. This one pinned to the front barn door with a hunting knife. No photo. No signature. Just 5 words. Stop digging or we bury you. Ellie pulled the knife out slow. They're getting sloppy. They're getting desperate, I said. We turned the ranch into a fortress. Ellie reconfigured the perimeter surveillance into a live relay. We installed thermal imaging. Reinforced the main house with steel latches and pressure sensors. I set traps, nothing lethal, just enough to make someone think twice before crossing another line. We also went on offense. Ellie created a digital map overlay connecting all the seized properties, their fake HOA leaders, and known shell companies. I contacted every landowner still fighting, some who had already lost, others clinging to scraps of legal hope. We formed a loose coalition. Ranchers, veterans, wildlife workers. No politicians, no corporate sponsors. Just people like me, like Lila, like the dozens more we uncovered. It wasn't just a network. It was a machine, eating land, spitting out asphalt, using fear as its engine and law as its license. The story went viral again. This time we had faces, testimonies, a name, Operation Quiet Zone. That was what Lane's internal documents called it. A nationwide campaign to convert rural conservation land into high-density residential zones under the guise of environmental enforcement. The media jumped on it. The DOJ opened a task force. Congressional hearings were whispered. But we weren't celebrating. Because we knew how these people operated. And we knew they weren't finished. They'd lost the element of surprise. So they'd come for us another way. 3 nights later, Ellie caught a drone hovering over the barn. She took it down with 1 shot, clean through the battery pack. The footage inside showed us in bed. Breathing. Vulnerable. The message was clear. You can't outwatch us. So we built something they didn't expect. We held a press conference. At the ranch. Invited every reporter who'd ever doubted us. Ellie spoke first. Then Lila. Then me. We laid out the whole timeline. Showed the documents. Released footage of Karen's arrest. Played audio of the HOA trap man's confession. And then I looked into the camera and said 1 sentence. This is no longer about one ranch. That night, we got a final message. Hand-delivered. No envelope. No threat. Just a USB stick placed at the front gate. On it, a video. Michael Lane. Sitting in a black leather chair, drink in hand. You think you've won, Mr. Jacobs? He said. You've exposed a few names. Cost me a few contracts. But I don't need Sunset Valley. I own half of Dallas. And I don't lose. He leaned forward. This ends when I say it ends. I looked at Ellie. She looked at me. We didn't flinch. Because when a man with nothing to lose is up against a man who's built everything on lies, The one who stands longer always wins. And we were still standing,